Chapter 1. Fort Knox. The Sealed Fortress. Fort Knox is more than just a name associated with gold. It is one of the ultimate symbols of the United States' economic and military power. Located in the state of Kentucky, it is officially known as the United States Bullion Depository and was designed to be the most secure place on Earth. But what do we really know about it? An impenetrable fortress. The Fort Knox building was completed in 1936 at the height of the Great Depression, during the presidency of Franklin D. Roosevelt. Built with reinforced concrete and clad in granite, the vault is surrounded by electric fences, watchtowers, and guarded by U.S. Army troops. The main door weighs more than 20 tons and can only be opened with a sequence of combinations distributed among multiple employees. Fort Knox is considered so secure that not even presidents have unrestricted access. Very few people have ever entered. In 1943, Winston Churchill visited the facility. In 1974, a delegation of journalists and members of Congress was allowed in after public pressure regarding the existence of the gold. Since then, no visits have been permitted. Why so? Much secrecy? Fort Knox is, in theory, where around 4,580 metric tons of gold are stored, representing more than 50% of all U.S. declared reserves. The rest is reportedly held at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and at U.S. Mint facilities. However, the fact that no independent audit has been conducted since 1953 raises questions. If there's nothing to hide, why not open the vaults for inspection? Theories and suspicions. Over the decades, several theories have emerged suggesting that part or all of the gold has been secretly sold or loaned to support the financial system, been replaced with fake bars made of tungsten or copper coated in gold, been used to fund covert operations during the Cold War as part of the government's black budget. Some analysts believe Fort Knox serves as a strategic theater piece, an imposing, heavily guarded structure meant to sustain confidence in the dollar and U.S. bonds, even if the gold is no longer there. What now? The lack of transparency fuels speculation. In times of economic crisis and global mistrust, knowing whether the gold is really there is more than a curiosity. It's a matter of national security and monetary stability. In the upcoming chapters, we'll explore what is known and unknown about U.S. reserves, gold substitution theories, declassified documents, and events that never made it to the headlines. Chapter 2. Official Reserves, America's Gold by the Numbers. The United States claims to own 8,133.5 metric tons of gold, according to data from the Department of the Treasury. This makes the country the largest holder of gold in the world, more than twice as much as Germany, the second-place holder. But where is all that gold? And why have the numbers barely changed in over 60 years? Official distribution. Most of America's gold, around 56%, is stored in Fort Knox. The remainder is distributed among Federal Reserve Bank of New York, approximately 13% of the reserves, U.S. Mint facilities in Denver and West Point, totaling about 31%. This distribution was strategically planned over decades, and each of these facilities has its own security protocols, all classified as national security sensitive. A suspicious consistency. Since the 1950s, the official quantity of U.S. gold has remained virtually unchanged. Wars, inflation, financial crises, pandemics, and multi-trillion-dollar stimulus packages have come and gone. Yet the gold, according to records, remains untouched. The consistency of the data has fueled theories that the gold may no longer be physically present. It has been loaned out or used in covert operations. The numbers are artificially frozen to protect confidence in the dollar. Why is gold still so important? Even though the U.S. abandoned the gold standard in 1971 under Nixon, the metal continues to serve as a psychological foundation of trust in the monetary system. By maintaining large reserves, the country signals stability and solvency, even if those reserves are never seen. Conclusion. Seemingly intact, America's gold stockpile remains a pillar of economic and strategic policy, but without frequent audits, public inspections, or transparency in movements, all we have is a statement of belief. In the next chapters, we will investigate who has tried to see this gold and what happened to them. Chapter 3. The Last. Visit. A carefully staged show? The year was 1974. The United States was emerging from the Vietnam War. Nixon had just resigned due to Watergate, and public trust in government institutions was at a low point. Amid growing conspiracy theories about Fort Knox and the actual existence of America's gold reserves, the U.S. Treasury organized something unprecedented: a guided tour of Fort Knox for a small group of outsiders. The tour that changed everything, or nothing. In September 23, 1974, then Treasury Secretary William Simon allowed about 24 visitors inside Fort Knox. The group included members of Congress and a few journalists. According to official statements, they were shown rooms lined with gold bars stacked to the ceiling. Photos were taken. Quotes were issued to the press. The message was clear. Yes, the gold is there, but this event, instead of silencing doubts, only added fuel to the fire. What critics pointed out: several issues emerged after the visit. No physical tests were allowed to verify the authenticity of the bars. The group was tightly controlled, only shown select areas. No follow-up audits were conducted and no independent inspectors were present. The event had all the hallmarks of a publicity stunt, not a transparent investigation. Skeptics questioned whether the gold was staged specifically for that visit. Was the gold only moved temporarily for the show? Why weren't more neutral experts invited? Aftermath and silence. Despite the unanswered questions, no similar visit has ever occurred again. The 1974 inspection remains the only time in modern history that Fort Knox was open to non-governmental eyes. Since then, the facility has returned to complete secrecy. For many, this visit only deepened suspicions. Instead of resolving doubts, it became a historical marker in the narrative of secrecy surrounding America's gold. Legacy of distrust. The 1974 tour is now often cited in conspiracy literature and investigative journalism as a classic case of government misdirection. It's become symbolic of a broader issue: a lack of transparency in institutions that are supposed to serve the public. In the next chapter, we'll delve into the question: if the gold truly is there, why not prove it? Chapter 5. The Tungsten Scandal. A Golden Deception. In 2009, a mysterious and troubling story began circulating within financial circles and later reached the media. Counterfeit gold bars filled with tungsten had been discovered in international markets, and some rumors hinted that they might have originated from the United States. Could it be possible that even Fort Knox's reserves were compromised? What happened in 2009? In the fall of 2009, several gold dealers and refiners in New York and Europe reported finding gold bars that, upon inspection, were revealed to have tungsten cores. These bars appeared authentic on the outside, stamped with proper serial numbers, weights, and purity markings. But internal testing exposed a fraud. Tungsten is nearly identical in density to gold, making it a perfect material for sophisticated counterfeiters. A gold-coated tungsten bar would pass weight tests and visual inspections unless drilled, X-rayed, or subjected to ultrasonic testing. The conspiracy angle soon, conspiracy theories erupted. Some claimed that hundreds of thousands of these bars were produced in the 1990s, possibly as part of a clandestine operation. A few analysts alleged that U.S. reserves themselves could be tainted, with tungsten-filled bars sitting inside Fort Knox or other storage sites. Others suggested the operation might have been an intentional ploy to manipulate gold markets, hide losses, or fund secret programs. No direct evidence has linked the U.S. government to the counterfeit bars. However, the sheer scale and precision of the counterfeits left many wondering who could have pulled it off, and why. Who benefits? If fake bars infiltrated official reserves, governments could quietly sell real gold while retaining the appearance of full reserves. The illusion of gold backing would support the strength of currencies and bonds. Covert agencies could use Proceeds from gold sales without congressional oversight. Investigation and silence despite the initial headlines. The issue quietly faded from the public eye. No major government investigations followed. Those who raised alarms were dismissed as alarmists or conspiracy theorists. To this day, no comprehensive explanation has been given for how so many tungsten bars entered the market, or where they originated. Implications for Fort Knox. If a sophisticated gold counterfeiting scheme did occur, and if no full audit has been performed at Fort Knox in over 70 years, what's stopping fake bars from being inside the vault? This possibility, while speculative, highlights a fundamental problem. Without verification, we are left with only assumptions. The absence of regular audits allows uncertainty to fester, and where there is uncertainty, there is vulnerability. In the next chapter, we'll examine the financial mechanisms that could be tied to America's hidden gold, including covert loans, international swaps, and backdoor deals that never made the news. Chapter 6. The Gold Swap Conundrum. Secrets in plain sight behind the scenes of global finance. One mechanism has long been rumored to serve as a tool for quiet gold movement: gold swaps. These opaque agreements, typically made between central banks and other large institutions, allow gold to be temporarily exchanged for currency or other forms of collateral. While seemingly innocuous, they raise critical questions. Has U.S. gold been secretly swapped, loaned, or encumbered? What is a gold swap? A gold swap is an agreement in which one party lends gold to another in exchange for cash or another asset, with the understanding that the gold will be returned later. It's a common mechanism used by central banks to gain short-term liquidity without publicly selling their reserves. But there's a catch. During the period of the swap, the gold may leave the physical custody of the lender and still appear as part of its official reserves. Cloaked in accounting, according to International Monetary Fund, IMF guidelines, central banks may continue to report gold involved in swaps or leases as part of their reserves, even if it is no longer physically present. This accounting treatment allows apparent reserve stability, increased monetary flexibility, minimal political scrutiny. Critics argue that this creates a loophole, enabling gold to be moved or used without transparency. If Fort Knox's gold had been used in such swaps, it might technically still exist on paper, while sitting in a vault overseas. Historical precedents and secrecy. In 2009, GATA, Gold Antitrust Action Committee, alleged that the U.S. had engaged in large-scale gold swaps through the Federal Reserve, citing obscure references in Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC, meeting minutes. These claims were denied by officials, yet the opaque nature of the transactions left room for doubt. Several countries, including Germany and Austria, have demanded the return of gold stored abroad after discovering discrepancies or slow repatriation timelines, hinting at possible encumbrances. Why would the U.S. do it? There are several plausible reasons why American gold might be used in swaps: to support the dollar during times of inflation or geopolitical stress, to backstop bailouts, or large-scale loans without congressional approval, to influence global gold prices, which affect inflation expectations and confidence in fiat currencies. All of these motives align with maintaining economic dominance, especially during crises. Hidden in plain sight. What makes gold swaps particularly insidious is that they can be hidden through accounting. A central bank can truthfully claim it still owns its gold, while another entity holds and possibly uses it. This creates the illusion of stability, while the true state of reserves remains hidden. Conclusion: gold swaps are the perfect financial ghost, technically legal, virtually invisible, and ripe for abuse. If Fort Knox's gold has been involved in such arrangements, the American public may never know. In the next chapter, we'll look into leaked documents, whistleblower reports, and the role of intelligence agencies in controlling narratives around U.S. gold reserves. Chapter 7. Whistleblowers and leaks. Cracks in the official story. As the mystery of Fort Knox's gold deepens, one of the few sources of insight has come from individuals willing to speak out. Whistleblowers, former insiders, and leaked documents. These rare voices challenge the official narrative, revealing a system where secrecy is the norm and accountability is nearly non-existent. The case of Edmund Moy, director of the U.S. Mint from 2006 to 2011, frequently fielded questions about the Fort Knox gold. While he maintained that the gold was safe and intact, he acknowledged the lack of recent comprehensive audits. His responses often seemed carefully worded, leading skeptics to argue that even high-ranking officials might not have full access to the truth. Leaked documents and classified reports. Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, requests have unearthed cryptic communications between the U.S. Treasury and Federal Reserve. Some suggest gold has been used in backdoor agreements or that its physical location is not as certain as records imply. Notably, several documents reference gold location swaps and interagency custodial arrangements without elaborating on their meaning. To this day, large portions of these reports remain redacted. CIA involvement. Declassified documents from the 1970s reveal that the CIA closely monitored global gold movements, especially those involving Soviet and Middle Eastern holdings. Analysts have speculated that the CIA, or other intelligence branches, may have an ongoing role in safeguarding or even relocating U.S. gold reserves for strategic purposes. If true, this could explain the decades-long resistance to a full, independent audit. National security, rather than financial transparency, might be the true rationale. The Vault engineer's letter in 2012, an anonymous letter surfaced online, allegedly from a retired engineer involved in maintenance at Fort Knox. The letter claimed that multiple sections of the vault had been sealed off for decades and that routine inspections were symbolic at best. While unverified, the letter added fuel to suspicions of hidden activity and misrepresentation. The problem of silence. Most insiders, whether from the U.S. Mint, Treasury, or Federal Reserve, stay silent. Some cite confidentiality agreements. Others say they simply don't know. This institutional opacity creates an environment where conspiracy thrives and truth becomes elusive. Conclusion: whistleblowers and leaks have given us fragmented glimpses behind the curtain. Yet without broader support or public outcry, their revelations are often dismissed or buried. In the next chapter, we'll explore global consequences, how the integrity of America's gold reserves, or lack thereof, could affect the global financial system if the truth were ever fully revealed. Chapter 8. Global Shockwaves. What if the gold isn't there? The possibility that the United States may not possess the gold it claims to hold is not merely a domestic issue, it is a global risk. With the U.S. dollar functioning as the world's reserve currency and American debt held by nations across every continent, the legitimacy of U.S. gold reserves underpins confidence in the entire financial system. If that gold were revealed to be missing, encumbered, or fraudulent, the ripple effects could be devastating. Confidence in the dollar. Although the U.S. dollar is no longer backed by gold, since President Nixon ended the gold standard in 1971, the idea that America could convert to a gold-backed system, or that it maintains sound financial practices, rests partially on the perceived strength of its gold holdings. If those reserves were proven to be overstated or non-existent, international trust in the dollar could collapse. Bond yields would skyrocket as investors flee to safer assets. Inflation could surge as confidence in fiat money erodes. Central banks would reconsider their holdings. Foreign central banks hold large amounts of U.S. dollars, treasuries, and even gold stored in New York. A Fort Knox scandal would prompt them to demand repatriation of their gold reserves, diversify away from the dollar, increase holdings in alternative assets like the euro, Chinese yuan, or cryptocurrencies. The resulting chaos would not be theoretical. It would be immediate and measurable in foreign exchange markets, sovereign debt risk premiums, and central bank policies. Gold price explosion. A sudden revelation of missing gold would drive demand for physical gold through the roof. Supply constraints would cause a dramatic price spike, potentially multiplying gold's market value several times over. A rush from ETFs and gold certificates to physical metal, further exposing paper gold schemes. Lawsuits, bankruptcies, and regulatory crises among institutions that cannot deliver promised gold. This would spark a re-evaluation of how gold is stored, valued, and trusted worldwide. U.S. geopolitical power at risk if U.S. gold reserves were exposed as a myth. America's credibility would take a generational hit. The dollar might survive, but U.S. influence in global institutions like the IMF, World Bank, and G7 would be damaged. Allies might question American leadership, while rivals, notably China and Russia, would likely seize the moment to promote alternative financial systems. Potential military and intelligence fallout in such a crisis. Military readiness and strategic dominance might also come under scrutiny. Funding, morale, and intelligence operations tied to perceived U.S. supremacy would face new pressures. This could open a dangerous window for adversaries to test American resolve. Conclusion: a revelation that Fort Knox is empty or compromised wouldn't just be a scandal, it would be a seismic event reshaping global finance. Confidence once broken takes decades to rebuild. In the next chapter, we'll explore what other nations are doing to insulate themselves from this very scenario by repatriating gold, increasing transparency, and preparing for a post-dollar future. Chapter 9. Global Reactions, Nations. Repatriating gold and abandoning trust. In a world where the integrity of U.S. gold reserves is increasingly questioned, many nations have taken preemptive action. Over the past decade, a growing number of central banks have demanded the return of their gold held abroad, particularly in New York and London, and have ramped up their own storage infrastructure. This shift is not just symbolic. It reflects deepening concerns about geopolitical risk, financial manipulation, and the looming decline of the U.S. dollar as the cornerstone of international finance. Germany's gold repatriation campaign. In 2013, Germany's Bundesbank announced its intention to repatriate 674 tons of gold stored in the United States and France. The announcement raised eyebrows. Why would a close U.S. ally suddenly express doubts about gold stored safely in Federal Reserve vaults? The move came after increasing domestic pressure from German lawmakers and economists who questioned whether the gold truly existed and if it was readily accessible in a crisis. Initially, the U.S. was slow to comply, returning only small portions of the requested reserves. By 2017, Germany had completed its mission, but not before sparking similar moves across Europe. Austria, Netherlands, and Hungary follow suit inspired. By Germany's example, other countries began to follow. Austria repatriated 140 tons of gold from London. The Netherlands quietly moved 122 tons back from the Bank of England. Hungary, in a bold move, increased its gold reserves by tenfold in 2018 and repatriated 100% of its holdings. The message was clear. Trust in Western custodians was eroding. Why are countries bringing gold home? Several overlapping reasons drive this trend. Geopolitical instability. Rising tensions with the U.S. and NATO uncertainty push countries to assert more control over strategic assets. Fear of sanctions or confiscation. Nations like Venezuela have faced blocked access to gold stored abroad. Currency diversification. Gold acts as a hedge against inflation, dollar devaluation, and systemic financial risk. Preparation for a monetary reset. Some economists believe the next global financial system may involve gold, requiring nations to hold it domestically. China and Russia's silent accumulation, while not repatriating, since they store gold domestically, China and Russia have been aggressively expanding their reserves. China has increased official gold reserves to over 2,000 tons, likely underreported. Russia surpassed 2,300 tons before 2022. Sanctions restricted its access to Western financial systems. Both nations view gold as a pillar of sovereignty and leverage in a post-dollar world. Central banks turning to transparency. Some countries, like Poland and Serbia, have gone further, publicly showcasing their gold holdings, conducting televised audits, building domestic vaults with 24/7 security monitoring. This is a sharp contrast to the secrecy surrounding Fort Knox. Conclusion: the global gold repatriation trend signals a profound shift in the financial world order. As nations hedge against future crises and reduce their reliance on the dollar, gold becomes not just a store of value, but a geopolitical chess piece. In the next chapter, we'll explore how digital alternatives like Bitcoin and central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, might be influencing this movement and what it means for the future of sovereign reserves. Chapter 10: Digital Disruptors, Bitcoin, CBDCs, and the New Gold Debate, AIS. The world questions the stability of physical gold holdings, particularly those claimed by the United States. A parallel revolution is unfolding: the rise of digital assets. From decentralized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin to state-issued central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, governments and private actors are rethinking what it means to hold and store value. The traditional view of gold as the ultimate safe haven is being challenged by technology-driven alternatives that promise transparency, mobility, and, in some cases, immunity from political manipulation. Bitcoin. The digital gold Bitcoin has earned the nickname digital gold due to its scarcity, decentralization, and resistance to censorship. Unlike physical gold, it can be transferred globally in minutes. It operates outside of state control. Its supply is fixed at 21 million coins. As trust in legacy institutions weakens, Bitcoin has become an alternative for individuals and even institutions seeking to escape fiat systems. Its blockchain-based transparency contrasts starkly with the opaque gold storage systems in places like Fort Knox. Major investors like Paul Tudor Jones and companies such as MicroStrategy and Tesla have publicly added Bitcoin to their balance sheets, citing concerns over inflation and fiat debasement. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. While Bitcoin offers a decentralized escape route, CBDCs represent the opposite: a fully state-controlled digital currency system. Nations like China, with the digital yuan, the European Union and the US are racing to develop CBDCs that offer programmable money with built-in regulations, improve transaction speed and tax enforcement, allow governments real-time control, and monitoring of capital flows. Critics argue that CBDCs could become tools for surveillance and financial control. However, they also offer a potential path toward a transparent monetary system, if designed with oversight. Gold-backed cryptocurrencies. Some projects attempt to bridge the two worlds by creating cryptocurrencies backed by physical gold. Examples include Pax Gold, a tokenized asset redeemable for physical gold; Tether Gold, issued by the same company behind USDT, with each token representing 1 troy ounce of gold. These hybrids aim to provide gold's trust and stability with crypto's portability and ease of use. Yet, like Fort Knox, they also rely on claims of backing, which demands proof. The future of sovereign reserves countries are beginning to diversify their strategic reserves by including digital assets. El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender and holds it in its national treasury. The UAE and Singapore are experimenting with blockchain-based settlement systems for trade and finance. In a future crisis, nations with access to both physical gold and digital currencies may be best positioned to navigate volatility. Conclusion: the digital era is forcing a reevaluation of what it means to possess and protect wealth. As physical gold faces skepticism and the dollar's supremacy comes into question, Bitcoin and CBDCs emerge as competing visions of monetary security. In the next chapter, we'll return to Fort Knox and explore the historical myths, Hollywood portrayals, and public fascination that have helped make it a symbol, or perhaps a distraction, from the deeper truths about America's gold. Chapter 11. The Fort Knox Myth. Hollywood legends and national identity. Fort Knox has achieved an almost mythological status in American culture. Shrouded in secrecy and symbolically linked to national security, the vault is more than just a storage site for gold. It's a pop culture icon, a political talking point, and for some, a source of deep skepticism. But how did this military facility in Kentucky become such a powerful symbol? The answer lies in decades of storytelling, cinematic fiction, and government silence. A fortress in the hills constructed in 1936 during the Great Depression, the U.S. Bullion Depository at Fort Knox was designed to be impenetrable. Made of granite, reinforced concrete, and steel, its walls are said to be bomb-proof. The vault door alone weighs more than 20 tons and requires multiple staff members with separate combinations to open, but this extreme security has fostered the opposite of transparency. The last time a significant group of outsiders inspected Fort Knox was in 1974, when a handful of journalists and Congress members were allowed a brief, highly controlled visit. Since then, requests for audits or access have been routinely denied. Hollywood's obsession. Fort Knox's legend grew thanks in part to Hollywood. One of the most famous portrayals was in the 1964 James Bond film Goldfinger, where the villain plots to detonate a dirty bomb inside the vault to irradiate the U.S. gold supply. The movie cemented Fort Knox in the global imagination as the world's most valuable target. Television shows, cartoons, and thrillers have continued the tradition, often portraying the vault as the ultimate heist objective, a last line of defense in apocalyptic scenarios, a place where secret government knowledge is hidden. This romanticized image obscures real concerns about accountability, political theater, and public curiosity. Over the years, politicians have invoked Fort Knox to signal strength or demand transparency. Congressman Ron Paul frequently called for an independent audit of U.S. gold reserves, citing public distrust. Chapter 11. The Fort Knox Myth, Hollywood Legends, and National Identity. Fort Knox has achieved an almost mythological status in American culture. Shrouded in secrecy and symbolically linked to national security, the vault is more than just a storage site for gold. It's a pop culture icon, a political talking point, and for some, a source of deep skepticism. But how did this military facility in Kentucky become such a powerful symbol? The answer lies in decades of storytelling, cinematic fiction, and government silence. A fortress in the hills constructed in 1936 during the Great Depression, the U.S. Bullion Depository at Fort Knox was designed to be impenetrable. Made of granite, reinforced concrete, and steel, its walls are said to be bomb-proof. The vault door alone weighs more than 20 tons and requires multiple staff members with separate combinations to open, but this extreme security has fostered the opposite of transparency. The last time a significant group of outsiders inspected Fort Knox was in 1974, when a handful of journalists and Congress members were allowed a brief, highly controlled visit. Since then, requests for audits or access have been routinely denied. Hollywood's obsession. Fort Knox's legend grew thanks in part to Hollywood. One of the most famous portrayals was in the 1964 James Bond film Goldfinger, where the villain plots to detonate a dirty bomb inside the vault to irradiate the U.S. gold supply. The movie cemented Fort Knox in the global imagination as the world's most valuable target. Television shows, cartoons, and thrillers have continued the tradition, often portraying the vault as the ultimate heist objective, a last line of defense in apocalyptic scenarios, a place where secret government knowledge is hidden. This romanticized image obscures real concerns about accountability, political theater, and public curiosity. Over the years, politicians have invoked Fort Knox to signal strength or demand transparency. Congressman Ron Paul frequently called for an independent audit of U.S. gold reserves, citing public distrust. In 2017, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin visited Fort Knox and posted a photo with the caption, "Glad gold is safe." But no audit was conducted. The lack of serious examination raises critical questions. Is Fort Knox a relic of Cold War symbolism or an active reserve? Could the secrecy be masking a more complex financial reality? An American identity symbol. Fort Knox has become more than a vault. It represents financial discipline and global dominance, a belief in sound money, even post-gold standard, a psychological anchor in times of economic uncertainty. Its symbolic value may now outweigh its practical one, especially in a digital economy but symbols matter. And the mystery surrounding Fort Knox continues to fuel debate and speculation. Conclusion: the fall. Myth of Fort Knox is a double-edged sword. It inspires awe and confidence, but also suspicion and controversy. As global trust shifts and financial norms evolve, the vault's mystique may soon face a reckoning. In the next chapter, we'll analyze what a full audit of the U.S. gold reserves would require, who resists it, and what might be uncovered if the vaults were truly open to the world. In 2017, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin visited Fort Knox and posted a photo with the caption, "Glad gold is safe." But no audit was conducted. The lack of serious examination raises critical questions. Is Fort Knox a relic of Cold War symbolism or an active reserve? Could the secrecy be masking a more complex financial reality? An American identity symbol, Fort Knox has become more than a vault. It represents financial discipline and global dominance, a belief in sound money, even post-gold standard, a psychological anchor in times of economic uncertainty. Its symbolic value may now outweigh its practical one, especially in a digital economy. But symbols matter, and the mystery surrounding Fort Knox continues to fuel debate and speculation. Conclusion: the myth of Fort Knox is a double-edged sword. It inspires awe and confidence, but also suspicion and controversy. As global trust shifts and financial norms evolve, the vault's mystique may soon face a reckoning. In the next chapter, we'll analyze what a full audit of the U.S. gold reserves would require, who resists it, and what might be uncovered if the vaults were truly open to the world. Chapter 12. The Audit. Question: what would it take to open the vaults? Despite decades of demands from lawmakers, economists, and the public, a full, independent audit of the United States gold reserves has never been conducted. The mystery surrounding Fort Knox and other storage sites has led to increasing calls for transparency. But what would a real audit entail? Who would need to be involved? And what obstacles stand in the way? A history of elusive oversight. The U.S. Treasury claims that its gold reserves are regularly inspected and verified by internal audits. But critics argue these processes lack independence, scope, and public accountability. The most cited inspection was in 1953, when President Eisenhower reportedly viewed the gold, though no formal audit followed. In 1974, a media tour with limited access was allowed, but no inventory was released. In 2011, the Treasury stated that 99% of gold bars at Fort Knox had been verified, yet this was conducted by internal staff. There has never been a full, transparent audit conducted by an independent third party. What would a true audit require? A legitimate audit of U.S. gold reserves would need to include the following steps: independent auditors, a neutral, internationally respected firm, e.g. Deloitte, KPMG, with no ties to the Federal Reserve or Treasury. Complete physical inspection. Every bar must be weighed, measured, and tested for purity. No sampling. Verification of serial numbers. Each gold bar has a unique serial number that must match official records. Transparency. The audit process and results should be fully documented and made available to the public. Unannounced inspections, preventative against staged or selective displays. Such an undertaking would require immense coordination and political will. Resistance from within. Efforts to launch a full audit have consistently met with resistance. Treasury officials argue the process is unnecessary and costly. The Federal Reserve, which holds some of the gold on behalf of the Treasury, often avoids direct comment. Bureaucratic inertia. Government agencies are historically reluctant to expose operational details. This reluctance only fuels suspicion, especially in an era when citizens demand more transparency than ever. Potential revelations. If an audit were carried out, there are several possible outcomes. Confirmation. The gold is all accounted for, validating decades of claims. Partial. Discrepancies. Missing bars, mismatched serials, or questionable purity could point to negligence. Major shortfalls. This would spark a global crisis of confidence in the U.S. financial system. Auditing would not only verify the gold but also affirm or challenge the credibility of U.S. fiscal management. The political implications. Audit, depending on its outcome, could embolden foreign nations to demand the same of their reserves held in the U.S., trigger calls for a return to the gold standard by certain political groups, undermine trust in the dollar if discrepancies are discovered. Conclusion: the refusal to conduct a transparent audit of America's gold reserves continues to cast a long shadow over its financial system. In the digital age, where blockchain offers real-time, immutable verification, the opaqueness of Fort Knox feels increasingly outdated. In the next chapter, we'll explore the global implications if the audit were conducted, and the gold was not all there. Chapter 13. What if the gold isn't there? Global fallout and financial shockwaves. The idea that America's gold reserves might not be fully intact is often dismissed as conspiracy theory. But what if it turned out to be true? The consequences would be staggering. The United States, long considered the cornerstone of the global monetary system, would face a credibility crisis with worldwide economic and political ramifications. A hypothetical nightmare, imagine an audit, reveals that a significant portion of the gold is missing, impure, or otherwise compromised. The world's largest economy would be forced to explain how a foundational pillar of its economic security had eroded without detection. Key immediate effects would include collapse of trust. U.S. fiscal integrity would be severely damaged. Currency shock. The U.S. dollar could experience a massive devaluation. Global panic. Central banks, investors, and governments would reevaluate their exposure to U.S. assets. The result could resemble a modern-day bank run on American credibility. Geopolitical realignment. Nations with rising economic clout, particularly China, Russia, and members of the BRICS bloc, have long criticized the Western financial system's dominance. A scandal involving U.S. gold reserves would justify their shift toward alternative systems, e.g., gold-backed trade, settlement, digital currencies, accelerate de-dollarization in global trade, strengthen their calls for a new multipolar reserve system. U.S. influence on the global stage would decline sharply. Domestic turmoil within the United States, the fallout would be severe. Political unrest, accusations of fraud, cover-up, and institutional failure could spark bipartisan outrage. Market chaos. Stocks, bonds, and real estate markets would experience unprecedented volatility. Constitutional crisis. The scandal could call into question the integrity of agencies like the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and the executive branch. Calls for resignations, arrests, and investigations would dominate headlines. Financial contagion. Modern finance is built on interconnected trust. If U.S. gold reserves were found lacking, foreign reserves held in the U.S. might be repatriated en masse. Gold prices would soar as investors scramble for hard assets. Credit ratings could collapse, raising borrowing costs and further weakening the dollar. Such a scenario could trigger a recession, or worse, a depression, not just in the U.S., but worldwide. The rise of alternatives. In the vacuum left by America's damaged credibility, other forms of financial security would rise. Bitcoin and decentralized finance could gain traction as trustless alternatives. Gold-backed currencies might re-emerge in international trade. Blockchain-based reserve systems could offer transparent alternatives to opaque vaults. This shift would represent not just a change in assets, but in ideology, from trust in governments to trust in code and transparency. Could it be covered up? Some speculate that even if such a shortfall were discovered, it would never be disclosed publicly. Instead, the government could quietly lease or buy back gold to fill the gap. Financial partners might be pressured to suppress the story in exchange for stability. The public might be fed an alternative narrative to preserve order. But leaks, whistleblowers, or independent investigators could still break the silence. Conclusion: while hypothetical, the absence of America's gold would represent one of the greatest betrayals of public trust in history. It would upend geopolitics, economics, and the very concept of monetary value. In the next chapter, we will delve into historical parallels. From Napoleon to Nixon, where gold vanished, was hidden, or manipulated, and how those moments reshaped empires. Chapter 14. Vanished Gold. Through history, lessons from empires and leaders. Throughout history, the disappearance, manipulation, or secret relocation of gold has played pivotal roles in the rise and fall of empires. These events are not just legends. They are documented moments of strategic retreat, economic crisis, and deception. Understanding them offers vital clues for interpreting the secrecy surrounding U.S. gold reserves today. Napoleon's missing. Millions in the early 1800s, Napoleon Bonaparte financed his wars with vast sums of gold looted from conquered territories. As defeat loomed, much of this treasure was hidden, lost, or secretly moved. Legends persist about convoys of gold that vanished during Napoleon's retreat from Moscow and his eventual downfall in 1815. Historians still debate how much of France's treasury was hidden or stolen, whether allies or insiders smuggled it abroad. If any was absorbed into private European banking networks, the gold never fully resurfaced, a mystery that inspired both treasure hunters and financial historians. The Nazis plundered gold during World War II. The Nazis stole an estimated $600 million in gold, worth tens of billions today, from central banks and private citizens across Europe. The infamous Reichsbank gold included looted reserves and gold fillings from concentration camp victims. Some of it was hidden in salt mines, sunken in alpine lakes, or transferred to sympathetic nations. The U.S. and allies recovered part of it after the war, but a large portion was never found. The controversy over this missing gold sparked decades of lawsuits, secret archives, and high-level political pressure. Nixon and the gold shock of 1971, in a pivotal moment of modern economic history, President Richard Nixon closed the gold window, ending the convertibility of U.S. dollars into gold. This unilaterally broke the Bretton Woods Agreement, where foreign governments could exchange dollars for gold at 35 Oz. Nixon claimed it was temporary. It became permanent. Many critics argue this was the final decoupling of paper money from any real backing. This decision caused global financial instability in the 1970s, cemented the U.S. dollar's dominance, but only through fiat, raised questions about the integrity of U.S. gold reserves from that point on. Venezuela's repatriation drama in 2011, Venezuela, under Hugo Chavez, demanded the return of its gold reserves held in London and other Western vaults. The move was seen as both anti-imperialist and a hedge against sanctions. Several tons were returned, but subsequent political turmoil blocked further transfers. Some gold reportedly went missing or was used as collateral in shadowy deals. This episode underscored how vulnerable gold becomes when stored abroad, and how geopolitics influences access to it. Lessons for the United States. These historical cases show that gold is often hidden, manipulated, or used as leverage in crises. Governments have lied or obscured the truth about their reserves. The disappearance of gold can reshape financial systems and public trust. Is it so implausible that the U.S., like past empires, might have reasons to obscure the reality of its holdings? Conclusion. From Napoleon to Nixon, history shows us that when gold disappears on its, whether through conquest, corruption, or policy, the fallout is always profound. As we move forward, the next chapter will explore whether America might one day return to a gold standard, and what that would look like in a 21st century world. Chapter 16. China and Russia's Golden Strategy, the Eastern Challenge to U.S. Dominance. While the United States clings to its claimed 800+ tons of gold and its legacy of monetary dominance, other global powers, particularly China and Russia, are executing long-term strategies to bolster their gold reserves. Their goal? Challenge U.S. dollar hegemony, build financial independence, and secure leverage in a changing geopolitical landscape. China's quiet accumulation. China has steadily increased its gold holdings, officially and unofficially, over the past 2 decades. Official reserves. As of 2024, the People's Bank of China, PBOC, claims over 2,200 tons, but experts believe the true figure could be significantly higher. Domestic gold mining. China is the world's largest gold producer. By keeping most of its mined gold within national borders, it builds reserves discreetly. Strategic purchases. Through state-run banks and covert channels, China is believed to acquire gold from global markets quietly to avoid price spikes. This strategy reflects Beijing's long-term vision of reducing reliance on the US dollar, backing the yuan with tangible assets, strengthening its hand in global trade negotiations. Russia's golden shield against sanctions. Russia's aggressive accumulation of gold accelerated after its 2014 annexation of Crimea, when Western sanctions hit its economy. Reserve shift. The Central Bank of Russia offloaded large portions of its U.S. Treasury holdings and replaced them with gold. Sanctions resistance. Gold, as a physical, untraceable asset, is immune to most financial sanctions. It gives Russia a monetary firewall. Production and storage. Russia ranks among the top gold producers and stores most of it domestically, tightly controlled by the state. By 2024, Russia's gold reserves exceed 2,300 tons, making gold the centerpiece of its reserve strategy. The BRICS and the gold-backed currency idea in recent years. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, have floated the concept of creating a gold-backed currency to rival the dollar. This currency would aim to facilitate trade within member states, offer an alternative to the SWIFT system, undermine US-led financial structures. While still theoretical, the idea garners growing attention as geopolitical tensions rise and trust in fiat currencies wanes. Gold as a geopolitical weapon. For both China and Russia, gold serves purposes beyond finance, symbol of sovereignty in a dollar-dominated world, leverage in trade negotiations, especially with resource-rich nations, insurance against financial warfare, such as asset freezes and currency manipulation. Some experts argue that gold could play a central role in any future multipolar monetary system, especially if trust in Western financial institutions continues to erode. The U.S. response, or lack thereof. Despite these developments, the United States has made no significant additions to its gold reserves since the 1970s, conducted no full independent audit of Fort Knox or other holdings in decades, maintained a don't ask, don't tell policy about gold policy. This raises the question, is the U.S. underestimating the long-term implications of China and Russia's gold play? Conclusion. While America's gold remains shrouded in secrecy, its rivals are making bold, strategic, and transparent moves to redefine global wealth. If gold once again becomes a foundation of trust in the financial world, China and Russia may be far better positioned to lead than most Western analysts are willing to admit. In Chapter 17, we'll explore one of the most persistent mysteries: the missing gold of global institutions, from the IMF to central banks, and whether some of that gold has quietly vanished without public accountability.